Hello, my friends. Today we're going to talk about narcissists, and we're going to talk about relationships with narcissists. This is a subject that is fascinating, I think, to a lot of people. And of course, this video is really just for kind of entertainment purposes, but I do think there are a lot of people out there that can get some comfort from hearing these stories, knowing that they're not alone and that it's not their fault. And there may be somebody out there who hears a story and realizes that it sounds familiar. And they may not even know that their horrible relationship or their situation is due to a narcissist. So, a couple of things before we get started. Number one, not all narcissists are abusers. These stories are going to be a specific type of narcissist that really ruins relationships. There are narcissists out there, people who have been diagnosed with NPD, who admit it, they seek help, and they work on themselves. I have great respect for those people because that is not easy. In fact, from what I understand, the vast majority of people who have NPD will never seek treatment because they'll never admit it. Even if all the signs are there, they'll just never even see it in themselves, and they'll never bring themselves to get help. So this is only talking about the ones that refuse to admit what's going on. The other thing I want to say is I've also been getting a lot of emails and information about BPD and the different types of treatments involved in that and what actually happens at those treatments. So I'm working on a video for that, and I'm actually going to be interviewing a licensed therapist, and I think they are pretty similarly credentialed to Therapy Today, the guy that did the video about Amberlynn. The difference will be that the person that I'm interviewing is actually very familiar with Amberlynn and familiar with gorlworld, so their perspective will be a little different. That was the one drawback of Therapy Today's video, was that he was coming at it thinking that Amberlynn was at least partially a reliable narrator, which we know that is not the case. And even with that, he was pretty skeptical. And real quick, speaking of emails, I am just really excited about the number of responses I got. I got so many that I'm probably going to have to do this in several videos. In fact, if I keep getting stories, I will probably just make this a recurring thing if you guys want me to. So I'm going to start off with a few, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. I think this could be the start of something pretty interesting. And if you have a story that you'd like to tell, please send it my way. So if you'd like to like and subscribe, that would literally be hectic. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to try to do in each video, I'm going to try to do 2 or 3, kind of depending on how long they are. And let me know kind of what you think about that, or if we should do more, or, you know, if you want longer videos or shorter videos or whatever. We'll kind of figure it out as we go. Okay. It says, yesterday you posted on your community tab asking for people's personal experiences with narcissists. And after some consideration, I've decided to share mine for 2 reasons. One is that there is a lot of victim shaming that goes on in these types of situations, which keeps people quiet. When you try to tell your story, you're met with, well, I would never have put up with that. Or why didn't you just leave? And I hear that a lot with Beck, right? There are a lot of people being like, what the heck? If you were so abused, why didn't you just leave? So hopefully this will shed some light on that, because it's just not that simple, guys. Or other such statements that really minimize the trauma bond that's present. I think those of us who are sucked into relationships like this are often primed in childhood through our own mistreatment and or have a personality that's easier to manipulate, such as being very sensitive to other people, wanting to please or help, and being very easygoing in general. And that is actually true. In fact, the number one target for a narcissist is an empath, right? Not an Amberlynn empath or a Shane Dawson empath, but an actual empath, like somebody who is really sensitive and really caring and wants to help people. That's like the mark, right, for narcissists. That is exactly who they want because they're so easy to manipulate, according to the narcissist. The other reason is that I like watching your channel because you remind me of my cousin. Your father wasn't a football player at Auburn University in the early 80s, was he? No. You can leave that part out of the video. No, I think that's funny because I get told I look like a lot of people. Most people say Woody Harrelson. I don't know. I can't really do a Woody Harrelson impression.
Embrace the probability of your imminent death. And know in your heart that there's nothing I can do to save you.
I was thinking about getting a wig like Hammock from Hunger Games, but no, my dad was not a football player. He wrestled in college, but no. I'm a person who seems to attract narcissists. I've learned that that's an illusion. What's actually happening is that I'm not seeing the red flags until it's too late. So I get involved with narcs for longer periods of time than other people. I worked for one for about 10 years, and during that time, I had a roommate who was a diagnosed narcissist for over 2 years. He's the one I'm going to focus on since I was the Beck in that situation. What I mean is that when we met, he started out by making me believe he was really interested in me and cared about me, but it turned out to be a manipulative tactic. He actually believed I was beneath him, and in my opinion, that justified how he treated me in his own mind. There were plenty of other people in his life, in his past, that he didn't treat nearly as badly. I knew he struggled with bipolar disorder, which is something that runs in my family, so I felt sorry for him and wanted to help. So that is pretty common too, right? Narcissists tend to be diagnosed with other things, and honestly, that's pretty familiar sounding with Amber too, right? They go to a therapist and they go to a psychologist and they talk about stuff, but they never really go into detail. They never tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So what ends up happening is they get diagnosed with stuff like bipolar and BPD and things like that, which may be the case. They may have lots of things, but they never go into enough detail to actually get diagnosed with what they need to get diagnosed with, which would be NPD, because they don't want to admit. Sound familiar? So, yeah, saying he has bipolar is probably pretty common, and he may, but something tells me he got diagnosed with that because he wasn't honest at his appointments. He was very charming and charismatic, which is typical of narcs and is how they worm their way into people's lives and get what they want. We ended up moving in together since he needed a place to stay, which was a huge mistake. Yeah, that's difficult, man. Once you get moved in, and that's what they want, right? They want you to move in as soon as possible. Sound familiar? Amberlynn is notorious for wanting people to move in or wanting to move in with somebody as fast as possible because that's how they get you. They want to make it as hard as possible for you to leave. My entire life became consumed with his mental illness. The only thing that mattered in the universe was what he was feeling at any given moment. And making him feel bad was the worst thing that I could possibly do. Obviously, feelings change quickly and often, so anticipating what would set him off or trying to get ahead of the game was nearly impossible. He had essentially no concept of anything outside of now. If there was money in the checking account and he wanted something, it didn't matter that it was barely enough to cover rent that was coming due. Although he would be furious or upset if we were short on rent, but only when it happened, right? He wouldn't be mad until it actually took place, till he could all of a sudden go, wait, we're short on rent? What the hell? You know? He also outsourced all responsibility of his actions to me, meaning he put the burden of preventing him from doing things he wasn't supposed to do on me as well. He would tell me stories about how his former friends wouldn't let him drink alcohol because it interfered with his medication. But he would order drinks when we were out or bully me into buying them, and then say things like, how could you let me do that? His bullying and manipulation tactics were on a level amberlynn has never achieved. I believe this at least partially a gender difference. Women tend to be more subtle in manipulation, whereas men are not. Although he had no qualms about blowing up my phone the way amberlynn does, even if I was at work or driving. And you know, amberlynn took that narcissism test, or she read through the symptoms and basically just said, yeah, none of this sounds like me. But it was a female narcissist test, you know, and it did kind of compare men versus women, where men tend to be more aggressive and women tend to be more covert. More than once, I had to temporarily block his number just so I wouldn't have to hear the phone ringing for a while when I wasn't in a position where I could answer it. There were consequences to ignoring him, though, since there was never a reason good enough. He would punch holes in the wall, destroy my things, let my dog out of the apartment when we lived just off a very busy highway, etc. Oh man. I'm a dog person, and that drives me nuts. I remember I had a boxer named Samson, and he got out, and we lived on a busy highway, and he thought we were playing, and he jumped out, and I was trying to get him. My wife and I were trying to get him, and he stood in the middle of the street, and his car started coming, and we thought we were screaming at him, stop. They stopped in time. And I just ran over and tackled Samson. Of course, he was like 100 pounds, so it was fine. But I tackled him and just held on to him while my wife got the leash because, it was terrifying. So yeah, to think that somebody would do that on purpose. Ugh. If I tried to confront him on his bad behavior, he would whine that I was making him feel bad, which was the worst crime of all, remember. Once, he told me he had to do those things in order to get me to do what he wanted. So he's basically being like, well, if I don't act like a total shithead, you won't pay attention to me. I can't get you to do the things that I want you to do if I'm not a complete asshole. He said this very matter-of-factly, as though it was something I would completely understand and agree with once it was explained to me. Another time, he had stolen money from me. I got really angry and raised my voice, and he calmly told me I had to leave, since he could not be around all this negativity. You stole my money. Ugh, I just can't handle this. That's crazy. That's wild. Since it was bad for his mental health. Yeah. Okay. He used bipolar disorder to justify, explain, excuse a lot of his behavior, but made no real effort to do better. I'm sure this pattern sounds familiar to you. Yeah, a lot of this sounds familiar. Whether his diagnosis of bipolar disorder was correct or not, I'm not sure. And it's the same with amberlynn's diagnosis of BPD. The bottom line is, though, it doesn't really matter if it's correct. They only want to use it at their convenience, not to use it as a springboard for help. That is a great way to put it, right? They love having BPD or bipolar or whatever if it can excuse their bad behavior. But if it became a nuisance or a problem, they would drop it. Just like Amberlynn with her BED, right? She talked about the binge monster. She talked about binging for years. She talked about it almost every video. And then she started going to, now, if you can believe this, she was going to get weight loss surgery. And they told her, if you have BED, you can't get weight loss surgery. And she just goes, yeah, I don't. I don't binge. I just overeat. You guys, duh. Stop saying BED. That's dumb. I've never said that, And it was just like, she just dropped it as soon as it became an inconvenience. He did not see me as a human being. I was a robot designed to take care of his bills, run his errands. He did not have a car most of the time we lived together, as he'd sold it for drugs. Do his chores, etc. He believed he should control every aspect of my day. From what I wore, he would claim that he couldn't be seen with me if I wore something he didn't like, although he could never pinpoint what it was that was wrong. And when I asked, he would say things like, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, which I interpreted to mean my social anxiety is up and I don't want to go to this place, but I can't say that, so I'm blaming it on you. So think about that. He's like, you're going to wear that? I just can't go with you if you're going to dress like that. Nope. And you're like, what's wrong with it? If you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. It's a child. And it's a way to turn the blame on somebody else, right? And that sounds exactly right. To when I slept, on the weekends, I often worked till very late at night, but that wouldn't stop him from waking me up early the next morning, since he was a morning person. Because that's all that matters, right? He's a morning person, so I don't care what you're doing. And that sounds like Amberlynn, right? She kind of forced Beck to stay up all night long, and their sleep schedules were all messed up to what I ate. Unlike Amberlynn, if he wanted something, he wanted me to eat the same thing. And he would get very upset and throw a tantrum if I wanted something different. So I would just keep my feelings to myself. So that's weird, man, which I think in their mind, it's like, I want Chinese food. And then you say, well, I want to get pizza, or I'm going to make a sandwich or something. And then they think, what, is Chinese food not good enough? Is what I want not good enough for you? That kind of thing. Like, it's defensive about everything, His trump card was cutting or threatening self-deletion. He would cut himself in lieu of apologizing or taking accountability for bad behavior. Often he would do it in front of me and would continue doing it until I dropped whatever it was I was complaining about. If I brought up the same thing at a later time, he would dismiss it, since he'd already cut himself. It took me a while to realize he viewed that as penance for his misdeeds, which was convenient since it was something he had complete control over. He was very quick to accuse or slip into self-pity. You want me to off myself. You hate me. Or all I wanted was pizza, and I can't even have that. That's all I wanted, which sounds like a child. After I refused to buy one because my checking account was overdrawn. And that, going back to the rent and all that, like, I want it. And if we can't afford it, I don't care. I just want it. You figure it out. I want the thing. And if I don't get the thing, we're going to have a problem. You figure out how to get it, And Amber's lucky that she makes as much money as she does, because if she didn't, I think she would be doing that same thing. And she did with Crystal, right? She took advantage of her parents for years, to the point where they were paying for her doctor's visits. They were paying for everything for her because nobody else could. She couldn't. But she didn't ever appreciate it, right? It was entitlement. She was owed that for some reason. He did see therapists regularly, and I went to appointments with him on occasion. It became very apparent to me that he was using his therapists for narcissistic supply. He was eating up the attention and had no intention of changing. Now, narcissistic supply is an interesting term. So a good example of this is when a narcissist, generally the husband, is in a relationship and the wife has a baby, right? If they're having a baby. And he realizes that the baby is going to be taking his narcissistic supply, right? The attention. That is their drug. And so there are a lot of narcissists who resent their child because they take so much attention from the person they've been manipulating all this time. I've been working so hard to get this person to do whatever I want, and this little shit comes in and takes all that from me, and it's wild. And that's, it's hard to wrap your head around the idea that a person could resent their child or hate their child, but a narcissist, they don't care about the kid. They don't care about the wife. They don't care about any of that. They just want the attention. And when that gets taken away, they spiral. But yeah, basically what's happening is the kid is taking their narcissistic supply. Oddly, in order to get a diagnosis of NPD, at least at the time, the patient had to acknowledge that their behavior was bad and want to change it. But I don't believe either of these actually applied to him. He loved attention, especially from women, and would get it any way he could. And that's another reason it's hard to diagnose NPD, is because you have to go in and be like, yeah, I manipulate everybody I know, and I have no empathy for anybody. What do you got for me? Most people aren't going to do that. Can you imagine amberlynn going in and actually... Well, and so another problem too is most of the things that she does that are narcissistic, she doesn't even realize it. We can go through a video of hers that a random person would watch and it doesn't seem all that bad. It's kind of annoying and whatever. But if you know amberlynn and you're familiar with narcissistic symptoms, there are red flags everywhere. I mean, it's just constant. So, and I don't think she recognizes that. Most of the time when she's doing these things, she doesn't even know. Yeah, it's almost impossible to diagnose somebody with NPD. You almost need to get the info from their partner or from people, you almost need a group therapy session for everybody to go, yeah, he did this and he did this and he did this. Yeah, oh yeah, he did that to me too. And then get a kind of consensus of all the behaviors this person has done, because they're never going to admit that shit if they even know they did it at all, On a side note, I have a theory that all large platform YouTubers have some degree of NPD. I think it's necessary on this platform since looking at and listening to yourself constantly are necessary parts of the job. Now, I will say, once you get to a certain size, most creators, not amberlynn because she's as lazy as she can be, most creators don't do that. I'll just give you an example, right? I play a game, or I did, I don't play it much anymore, but it's called Destiny 2. And there's a guy named Asdacross who is one of the bigger creators in that space. He has a huge number of followers on Twitch and he has like, I don't remember how many subscribers, but a lot of subscribers on YouTube and stuff. He basically just plays the game, right? He records as he goes. He sends it off to an editor. They do all the work and then they put it out, right? He pays them to do all the work and watching it and doing all that stuff. And all he ever does is play the game. And I think that's the case for a lot of the bigger YouTubers. They just are the talent, right? The people in front of the camera. And then they send that video footage to an editor, and that's who actually goes through it in most cases. The reason amberlynn doesn't do that is because I don't think she's making enough money to be able to split it with an editor. And also, I think you're right in the sense that somebody like Amber, a large following and doing it themselves, probably lends some credence to that. So I think it just kind of depends, because a lot of them don't watch their own videos. They just record them and somebody else watches them. But amberlynn absolutely fits that. For context, my roommate once told me he would only listen to an audiobook if he were the one reading it. Something that flabbergasted me, since it never even crossed my mind, but he was absolutely serious. That is wild. Like, I don't like listening to myself, and I think most people don't, right? I think we all sort of have that in common. I mean, I guess most of us, obviously there's some people that are not like this, but a common theme among most people is that we don't like to hear our own voice. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. The 3 years or so that I knew him, along with my narcissistic boss, left me completely bankrupt in every way possible. I have not spoken to either of them in over 10 years, and I'm still not fully recovered. At least I have learned to identify red flags much earlier on, and I'm getting much better at avoiding people like that. Although it's difficult not to swing too far in the other way and see everything as a red flag. That is difficult, right? Because everybody does stuff. Everybody makes mistakes, and a lot of people just have bad habits. That is a difficult thing to do, to differentiate between, is this person who's talking about themselves a lot, or is this person who is impulsive when they buy things? Is that enough to be concerned? Or is this just kind of a quirk of theirs that I should get used to? That's tough. I hope I didn't overwhelm you with information, and I hope the information I did provide makes sense. Absolutely. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have about my experience. Another good resource, depending on how deep into the rabbit hole you want to go, is a YouTuber named Lee Hammock. And the YouTube channel it's at Mental Healness. And he is a self-aware narcissist. He's been in therapy for years, but he understands their thinking from the inside. So he's able to explain it from their point of view, which is amazing. That is so cool. And like I said at the very beginning, somebody who can recognize they have NPD and seek help for it deserves all the respect, and all the admiration for doing the right thing when it goes against every fiber of their being to get help and to admit that they're not perfect, that there's something about them that needs to be addressed. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily. Personality disorders and mental illnesses, those aren't things that are wrong with people, but they're things that need to be addressed. So thank you for reaching out. And I am glad that you are able to identify the red flags. That's a big step in being able to have a healthy relationship, is to identify the red flags. But yeah, good luck in trying not to overcompensate by seeing everything as a red flag. Okay, so this will be the last one for this video. It says, hello. First off, I want to say thank you for exploring and offering a platform for the specific topics you delve into in your videos. The reason why I have maintained my investment in Amber's channel for so long is due to the fact that her behaviors are so profoundly similar to the way that my mom acts and treated me growing up. And it's so wild when so my mom asked me, because I told her I've been making YouTube videos, and she is sort of familiar with YouTube and stuff like that. And she said, well, what are you making them on? And she assumed probably that I was going to be making it on like video games or something. So I tried to explain it, and her weight really didn't come up. Amber's weight didn't really come up. And so when she saw the first video, she kind of looked at me like, are you just making fun of this girl because she's fat kind of thing? Like, she didn't say that, but she kind of had that look like, really? But then when she started watching it and hearing what I was saying, she was like, oh, that is, she is pretty bad. Like, and I had never told her any of the lore or anything. And so, calling out Amber's behavior can help. It can actually do some good and bring some awareness to some of these behaviors that we see all the time that we may not even realize are bad. So, and being surrounded by so much negativity and pretty heavy topics, no pun intended, it does feel good to know that there's some positivity throughout all this. It was extremely vindicating to watch reaction channels pinpoint, deconstruct, and criticize these behaviors. In 2019, I hadn't even realized that my mom was abusive because every single time I had a modicum of doubt that the treatment I endured for my entire life up to that point wasn't healthy or normal. I was gaslit into believing I was selfish, vindictive, ungrateful, and wrong for implying any degree of mistreatment took place. So, yeah, that is a defense mechanism for a narcissist or somebody with similar personality disorders, because they don't ever want to admit that there could be something they don't like about themselves or something they think is wrong with them, right? So when you say, I don't like the way you treated me when you said that, they immediately bounce it back to you. That's that Darvo, right? They will always make you the bad guy. So this is the doormat mom, and she is basically estranged from her at least one child. I don't know a lot of the details and stuff, but I know that she has at least one child who has just walked away and disowned her and gone completely no contact. And she is on TikTok basically spending her entire time blaming the daughter for whatever happened. And the more she talks, the more obvious it is that she's the problem. And it's pretty obvious why her daughter, I think it's her daughter, left. But she will spend the entire video blaming everything on her daughter. Anyway, so yeah, they're gaslighting and darvoing all over the place. Reaction channels offered an unbiased perspective on similar behavior, a separate situation that mirrored my own. A group of people shocked at the abhorrence of Amber's actions, phrasing, manipulation of language, etc. And I know some people heard unbiased and went, And, I think it started unbiased, but we all are biased at this point because we know Amber. We have heard her talk for so long that our bias was formed over the years by listening to her and watching her videos. And I can't speak for anybody else, but if Amber actually took accountability and actually got help and turned things around, I would still call out the bad behavior when it would pop up, but I would give her credit where it was due, but she just won't. So I guess that's good for me. Once I clicked it, it was like the floodgates opening. Every doubt that had been previously beaten out of my mind became undeniable. There was a revealed brutality that, once unveiled, could never be hidden again. Yeah, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. No, there wasn't any justification for being a stay-at-home mom who acted like I was a burden for asking for a meal. No, I shouldn't have been forced into forgiving her every time she got drunk and told me how useless I was. That my brother gave her hope for the world and I didn't. That my fruitful efforts to improve my grades when I was suffering and struggling weren't something to be proud of because it's just what I should have been doing to begin with. That I was being purposely malicious toward her as a child because I am smart and I knew what I was doing. Yes, it was absolutely morally reprehensible of her to accuse my late grandpa of SAing me, all because she was jealous of the fact that I had a stronger relationship with him than I ever had with her. He took care of me when she wouldn't. She would frequently try to remove him from my life before he passed. I lost him when I was 10. She got to see him in the hospital when he went. I didn't. I was too young. I have fought endlessly to understand myself and what I've gone through and why I am the way I am. That goes back to that narcissistic supply. The kind of like I mentioned earlier with the husband, once your wife has a baby and they want that attention, it's the same with the grandfather in this. right? The mom wanted that attention and grandpa was getting it. Her own father, I think it's the mom's father, was getting all that attention. And instead of just sharing the attention or just being okay with it, which is wild because think about it. The mom didn't seem to care much about the writer here, but because somebody else was getting her attention, the mom couldn't handle it. And so she accused her own father of essaying. So there's a saying that says a narcissist will let the house burn down before they admit they started a fire. And they will do anything. Like there's no level that they won't sink to get what they want, to get their narcissistic supply, or just to do kind of whatever they want to do. Always knowing ever since I was young that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something that I couldn't even confide in my therapist about because it was just too awful to admit to. I was diagnosed with CPTSD and OCPD. The way I coped throughout my life can be summed up with constant self-punishment, both physically and mentally. My mom saw me destroying myself as a child and would tell me, "We've done everything to figure out what's wrong with you. Why haven't you gotten better?" And despite all of that, I still thought I could come up with the right words to say, the perfect, indefectible sequence of words that would gently articulate the ways in which she's irrevocably damaged me. All I wanted was acknowledgement, accountability. I tried multiple times, cutting her off and reaching back out because I felt guilty for doing so. I finally ended up moving out of state, blocked her on everything, and haven't had the energy or desire to talk to her at all. I have enough evidence to realize that I am incapable of formulating the perfect plea, because that's not what it's about, right? You can't convince her. She doesn't care. She wanted the control. She didn't want you to explain. She didn't want to understand. In fact, if you did give her the perfect words, that would probably just make her mad. It's something she'd have to come to on her own, and I don't think she will. Even now, after all the arduous growth I have worked for, it's all so difficult. I know when my feelings are irrational. It's so painful when logic doesn't supersede emotions. It's so painful to feel at the mercy of your own brain. I can at least be proud of the accomplishments I've made, that I've done so much more than her in a short amount of time. And I don't know that I would compare yourself to them, which I get, like, you've done so much more than her in a short amount of time. And I get what you're saying there, where you're saying, you know, I am living my life more fully. I'm getting more out of life than she did or is. But I would just be careful comparing, because what's important to you is definitely not the same thing that's important to her. It's not apples to apples, you know? Because you can think of a lot of things in your life that you can be proud of that they won't care about. And then they could think of a lot of things in their life that they're proud of or just can brag about, I guess, that don't really mean much to you. That I am almost 100 days sober from alcohol, and she is still unable to admit she even has a problem. I apologize for the length of this, and I hope it isn't too heavy. I appreciate your videos so much, and thank you for exploring this aspect of GorlWorld. No, I appreciate you, and congratulations on, and I hope at this point you're at 100 days, and if not, keep going. It's a tough road, and it never really stops. It gets easier, but that's something we'll talk about another day. So I appreciate you so much. And I think the worst part about having a narcissistic mother, and it sounds like you cut yourself off, went no contact, just like we were mentioning, or just like I was mentioning with the doormat mom, where I imagine she's a lot like your mom as far as not being able to see that she's the problem. You cut yourself off. Your mom was probably like, what an ungrateful child. Being in a narcissistic romantic relationship is difficult because of the manipulation, and it makes it hard to leave, especially when you move in. But being stuck with a narcissistic mom, that's tough. And no wonder you end up with CPTSD. And there's no telling how much damage is done to your psyche growing up, being manipulated and being treated like that. So I am really glad you're getting help. And again, it's a tough road. Every day it gets easier, even if it doesn't feel like it. What'll happen is today it's hard. Tomorrow it's hard. The next day it's hard. But in a month, you'll look back and realize how much easier it is now than it was then. Each day is hard, but as time goes on, it really does get easier. But you still have to keep it up. So keep up the good work. Take care of yourself. Once we are adults, we don't need our moms anymore. As much as we want to love them and want them to be in our lives, if you have a mother that is a good mother that you can be friends with or can spend time with and have a relationship with, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Once you're an adult, you can choose. And you don't owe them anything, right? They did their job of raising you to an adult, whether it was good or bad, but you don't owe them anything. So I hope some of this information was interesting and entertaining. I think it's fascinating. I think really diving in and hearing people that have experienced it tell their side of it is helpful. I think hearing it from the partner's perspective or the family member's perspective is great. I think the problem is we're rarely ever going to hear it from the narcissist perspective. That's why I think that Lee Hammock could be a great resource. And I'll check them out for sure. I'll check him out and just kind of see what he has to say, because I'm fascinated by that. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And if you did, please leave a like and let me know if you'd like for these to go longer, or if you'd like for them to, maybe just be like one kind of longer story in each one. But yeah, going forward, we'll just kind of keep going and we'll just play it by ear and see what everybody likes. So I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.